How's everybody doing? Lunch coma setting in, hopefully not too much. I see a few coffees out there so people are prepared. So thanks for having me, and during the presentation I'll be sharing a little bit of insight about AGCO, about the challenges that we were faced back in 2013 and the plan that we had put together, the solution that we put together to solve those challenges of the time and the future, and then some of the results that we've been able to attain over the last several years, and with that also what we're working on going forward. So we had a video here, and for whatever reason we're not able to get the audio and video to work. And what we were going to basically share with you was a little bit of insight about AGCO. And I'll ask the question, who has ever heard about AGCO before? 1, 2, 3. Now, to have 50% or 45% of the room be able to answer that question, it's the first time in my 14 years at AGCO I've had that high level of people know what AGCO is all about. For those of you that aren't familiar with us, we're the third largest agriculture manufacturer producer in the world. And within that, about 80% of our business is done outside the U.S. Okay, and that's why many of you maybe not have heard of us here locally. When we started our company back in 1990, our first year, we basically had $200 million in annualized revenue. And last year, 2017, which we just closed last week, we were up to $8.3 billion. So over that time period,
Did you just put in a award?
yes,
Or it was at the assembly show in Chicago?
that's correct. I'll get to that in a little bit, and the last video would provide a little bit of insight as to why. So within that, we've grown very aggressively over the years, some of that through organic and some of that through acquisition. Today, we have 54 manufacturing plants spread across the globe. Some of those are OEM plants, like you'd find in automotive or heavy truck or construction. Some of the others are supply plants, which make what we call core competency, engines, transmissions, some gearbox type of driveline activities. When you look at the major brands that we have spread across the globe, it's really 5 major brands. Challenger, which we purchased from Caterpillar back in 2002. That's one of our main high horsepower product lines that we sell through Caterpillar distribution in North America, as well as across the world. Fendt, which is a German brand, although growing significantly across the globe as well. It's known as the Rolls-Royce, or the most high-tech tractor in mass production today. GSI, which is not an OEM or farm equipment per se product line, but rather grain storage and protein handling systems with #1 market share across the globe. Massey Ferguson, which many of you may recognize as one of the most highly recognized agricultural names across the globe. And then Valtra, which is a more customized, smaller, what I call brand, highly known in Scandinavia as well as in Brazil. Now, farming has come a long way over the years, and a lot of what drives AGCO is innovation, and a lot of what drives our industry is also innovation. And when you look at some of the facts and figures over the course of time, the agriculture industry has really grown from back in 1950, on average, each farmer supported 15.5 consumers or end customers, you and I, for example. In the year 1990, when things started to change, when we first had the initial auto guidance system, so think of cruise control for your tractor or for your combine, we increased that ratio to 100-to-1. And where we're driving that by 2020 is a 200-to-1 ratio. And that's in order to help keep up with growing population growth, as well as the middle classes that are developing in some of the BRIC and other areas of the world, where you've got 2 drivers of the agricultural product. One is the grains themselves, but secondly is the proteins that actually consume those grains, that more and more people around the globe are able to then participate in consuming. Okay, so our challenges. So back in 2004, our company said we're growing very aggressively through acquisition. The top line's growing quite well, and we need to take a look at our supply chain and optimize some of the true opportunities that lied within that across the globe. At that point in time, we put together a new set of senior executives. Martin Rickenhagen, our current CEO, came in, along with a number of other executives, to try to realize those benefits within supply chain. At the time, we were having major, let's call it complicating factors that we were facing, let's call it headwinds. Globalization, as the internet and more people were connected, competition in terms of now you've got some state-run companies, other privately run companies around the world having a global application and global markets that they could get into. Volatility within the crop pricing and farmer income, as well as just the complexity of integrating our network, which at the time was 26 factories. We then took a look at our own internal challenges and said, what is our company like today? But more importantly, what will it be like tomorrow? Because we need to plan for tomorrow, maybe even more importantly than today. And with that, we put together what at the time was a profile of what our existing landscape looked like, which was very regional and or site oriented. From there, we said we need to develop and integrate a much more holistic approach to the way that we manage supply chain. And within that, compared our structure at the time to what it would look like in the future. And at the time, it was, say, 6,000 different direct material suppliers, 30 some odd plants at that point in time. And with that, we needed to develop an open architecture that would be easily able to absorb new acquisitions, to easily absorb a global proliferation of our products that we produce, but even more importantly, something that could become more user-friendly for our supply base. And at the time, if you were dealing with AGCO, they call it 30 plants at the time, there may be 30 different ways of engaging with us. And within that, we became a very challenging customer to deal with. And that's not something that we wanted to do. We wanted to go the opposite. We wanted to become easier to do business with. And with that, we looked at basically innovation and technology as a way to achieve that. At that point in time, we said we want to be able to integrate it initially at the regional basis, all of our, call it B2B with our suppliers, and the way that we manage our inbound logistics. So we said we've got the opportunity to drive improved performance, also cost, reduce the risk, and become much more proactive in the way that we support our manufacturing plants and our end customers, increase the transparency, which does help reduce some of the risk, but it also then increases the customer service levels internally as well as externally, which was very important for us and continues to be. And as I mentioned earlier, we want to invest in innovation. And now we'll talk a bit about what that was and is today. So we based it on 4 building blocks. One of those building blocks was our inbound transportation network. And within that, we said back in 2012, we want to have, by 2018, one global instance, one global transportation management system that all of our sites, all of our supply base, and all of our dealer networks could rely on. Within that, increased transparency, but also be able to handle the dynamics of our business. And if you've ever been to an agricultural manufacturing plant, you may have a tractor or combine that, I'll just put it in dollars examples, that may cost 500,000 euros. The one right behind it might be 50,000 euros. So you can imagine the complexity when you're producing anywhere from 20 to 80 of those machines per day that your inbound transportation network needs to be able to contend with. So we said we need to have something that is very dynamic and forward-looking. And with that, we found a partner out of Germany by the name of ForFlow. And with that, we developed an integrated transportation management system that would allow us to look forward based on our material requirements to our suppliers to say, what does our forward traffic inbound pattern look like? What do we need in terms of equipment, offering, load management, et cetera? And with that, we developed a concept with ForFlow that would enable our suppliers to load or create a transportation order 2 days before it gets picked up. That would then go into the meat grinder, and we would basically say to optimize that inbound load, we basically need to have XYZ supplier go milk run, XYZ go LTL or groupage, or others go into truckload. And with that, we were able to significantly reduce our costs, which we'll come to in a little bit. We're able to initially win some very high recognition in Europe, which is where we piloted this process at. And I think most importantly, we proved to our organization that investing in technology or innovation paid huge dividends all the way around, whether that was cost, performance, also CO2 emissions, all things I'll get into a bit more detail later. The second element was how do we connect with our supply base. And as I mentioned back in 2004, when we started this overall initiative, we had 6,000 direct material suppliers. Today, we have around 3,600. By the end of this year, we will have one globally standardized way of engaging with all of those suppliers. So with that, if you're doing business with AGCO, you do business through one portal, and with that have a standardized way of receiving our forecast, receiving our firm orders and releases, the way that you send ASNs into us as far as the advanced shipping notices. In certain countries, how you can invoice into us and no longer have to reach out to our accounts payable to ask when they're going to get the check. They can see it right directly into the system, which improves serviceability for everyone around. And within that, our goal, again, very similar to the transportation network, was by the end of 2018 to have that holistically integrated network, and we will achieve that with our last region, meaning Asia, going into effect this year. The third building block was risk management. And within that, you can imagine with a global network that, and many of you deal with this on a regular basis, stuff happens. Whether that's weather delays, whether that's strikes, whether that's ships running aground, whatever it might be. And ideally, you find out about that as soon as it actually happens so that you can take appropriate measures before you find out you've got a problem at one of your plants or you find out that you can't get product to one of your customers. We partnered with a company by the name of Risk Management. I believe they've got offices in Boston and then also in Munich. And what we found was some really, really cool stuff. And it might be kind of hard to see, but basically we have all of our suppliers loaded into the risk management system. And with that, there's constantly running apps that are out looking on Google, looking at the various media apps at what's happening with these particular suppliers, what's happening with these particular routes, what's happening in these particular countries. And then based on who is responsible for a supplier or a customer or a particular area, you can set up alerts. And those automatically go to your buyers or your material planning professionals, whoever it might be as you've got it set up. And we had a case last year where we had a major supplier of one of our hydraulic systems in Germany who had a fire. And we were alerted by this tool before the owner was of the company. We actually called and woke him up out of bed and said, hey, by the way, do you know that your plant's on fire? Well, that one particular plant supported 60% of the hydraulic accumulators to the agricultural world. We never missed a beat. We never missed a customer delivery because we were the first ones on the case. And what is the one thing that basically you can't recover without a lot of money? It's time. So having a very strong and robust risk management system that is looking at time, that is also out looking at those potential risks at a supply base, whether it's financial, whether it's the transportation leg or the weather patterns, et cetera, becomes very, very important and valuable to an OEM or really any type of business that's tangibly moving things around the globe. We also use this type of approach to look at potential new suppliers or service providers in the case of, say, shipping lines or trucking lines. And we will take decisions that basically say, okay, Mr. Supplier or service provider, your financial stability is not sufficient enough for us to basically engage in a long-term partnership with you. And again, it's how do you prevent those type of risky situations from ever coming into your supply network, that you identify the risk before it happens. And just some examples, like this is one where, we get the emails every day of a ship that ran aground off of Belgium. And within a matter of an hour of finding this out, we were able to determine which products that we had on the ship, what was our basically contingency plan that we had to in order to fly, or et cetera, so that when we understood from the shipping company when their ship was going to be moving again, we already had decision paths in place that we could take immediate actions upon. It's really powerful stuff, and anybody that's looking for any type of inside information or a path to this, I recommend Risk Methods very highly. The fourth pillar is what we call our supplier performance, where we integrate the first two building blocks, or three building blocks. That is the supplier's performance to our transportation network, which comes with a set of requirements that they need to conform with. Secondly, how are they doing to our B2B information exchange? Are they checking and receiving the orders that we send them? They've got a certain amount of time frame. They've got to pull them down. Otherwise, they get a fun alert that says, hey, you guys, you didn't do it. You're supposed to do it. You're dinged for not doing it. on-time delivery, and then also the risk management perspective on their financials. We utilize this as part of our supplier segmentation when we're doing our sourcing to understand, do we have the right type of supplier going into the right socket for a new product launch? So for us, the real benefit comes not from each one of these four pieces, but how do you pull the four pieces into one converged way of working? And within that, there's a lot of data, right? The whole master data, and then the question is, what's important? What do you use? What do you get value out of? And in this particular case, we were able to basically integrate all of these four pieces into our, what we call supply chain inbound puzzle. And these four elements integrate, overlap, complement each other in a way that our factories and our customers basically can simply understand where things are at a point in time, and a globally standardized approach. And there's a lot of efficiencies and power that come into that for us. So within that, I also had another video here that we weren't able to get to work, but we do have another one coming up that we will. And essentially, we summarized how all of these pieces came together. And at the very beginning of this, back in 2012 on the inbound side and on the B2B side, it started out with a group of people that basically said, we've got a vision, we've got a plan, and we're aligned on that. And we're going to implement that over the course of the next 5 years. And with that, what it enabled us to do was focus our resources on a longer-term vision rather than having different regions and different groups off on their own. And with that, we were able to implement these four pillars within basically 3 of our 5 regions, but in an integrated way. So there wasn't any overlap in terms of what people were looking at. Each of the regions understood what the other was doing. And as a result of that, on the inbound side, we're able to reduce our costs by 25%, all right? And what we were able to do on the supplier on-time delivery performance is improve that by 15%. We reduced our CO2 emissions by 18% in Europe. All in all good things, right? But it started with a vision that led to a ease of doing business with AGCO, so benefit to our suppliers, because sometimes suppliers are always of the perspective of, you want me to do more work. No, we're responding to what your challenges are. We're trying to help you be a better supplier to us, to help you grow your business if you perform. And with that, we've taken out 40+% of the suppliers over the last several years, because not everybody is a good fit. Right? Come back to that a little bit later. So when we talk about the big benefits, we were able to easily transfer this approach across the regions because everybody was aware of what was happening. Everyone had input into it before it came to their region. Our IT partnerships were very strong from the very beginning. And with that, we continue to challenge ourselves and our partners to continue to develop the next level of innovation that we need to continue to bring. And in all 4 of those cases, we're already working on what are we going to be doing in 2022, 2025. And we're looking for big bang. We're not looking for those incremental baby steps, although that's what gets you there. But what we're looking for is, how do we drive out another 20% of our inbound costs by those timeframes? And I challenge some of you to think about what that means. And for us, what that means is it's having people dedicated, focused on that strategy, and not adding it to existing people that have a full-time job already, because you're never going to really get the big bang out of that. You need people that are attending conferences like this, learning, meeting, talking to people. And that only comes when people have the time to be able to do it and expand on it. Collaboration and cooperation, I think I expanded on that quite a bit. Transferability, we've actually been able to have some of our own tier 1 suppliers benefit from taking on some of these exact same type of approaches within their business, right? I mean, we're an $8 billion company, right? So we've got bucks, we've got scope, but we've had some $500 million suppliers that are able to implement this at a smaller scale, but they're seeing similar type of benefits. That ends up benefiting us because now their performance is much more robust. And from a cost perspective, there's a little bit of sharing that goes on there, so everybody wins in that whole scenario. Here we talked about the cost savings at 28%, break even in 12 months. The business case that we put forth was a 42% ROI. We turned it at 73. which our C-level really, really appreciates and likes. And then the question is, how do you do more faster, right? And I get hit with that all the time. But part of the challenge is doing it right, slowly, and steadily, and stably. So I challenge, for those of you that are on the journey, do it right, and that doesn't always mean as fast as possible, because when you do that, sometimes things get dropped. So the awards. So earlier this year, we won this best in class for our wearable technologies for our Google Glass, and we do have a video. We'll show that momentarily. And that's impressive for us. I mean, we're very happy with that, because typically companies think of, oh, ag, that's old school, that's not innovative. But I mean, we were the first agricultural company to win this award in North America. We're proud of that. Our factories are proud of that. The smart logistics, which I'm talking about, we won the German award in 2016. In 2017, we received the European Logistics Award, which is basically you take the 30 European countries, each of them has a winner from their own country. They all then compete, and we ended up winning, right? We're beating people like Bridgestone. We're beating people like Ford. That's the level of innovation that we're bringing and being recognized in the marketplace. And we're an ag company. We're not supposed to do that, but we do. And those companies are now coming to see us to learn how we do things, how we implement it, and where we're going forward. And we're very open with that. And we entertain probably in the neighborhood of 30 to 40 events per year now, where we have tours coming into our factories to talk on the smart logistics piece. And on this particular wearables thing, which you'll see a video on shortly, we'll have 2,000 to 3,000 people come through our factory a year, just on that particular area. Okay? That doesn't happen just by chance, all right? As I mentioned earlier, it's about collaboration and cooperation. And this is a picture some years back where I've got a cross-functional group of leaders from across the AGCO globe, where we have, a couple times a year these face-to-face discussions to say, where do we want to go? And it's a blank sheet of paper. Where do we want to go? And we talk, we align, we debate, and then we agree. And then from there, we set a rolling 5-year strategy. And too many times what we see with companies today when they're not, valuing those face-to-face discussions, particularly on an international basis, there's a lot of value left on the table that's, less than or much more than a $50,000 team event that you're going to have when people are flying in from around the world. And any type of global initiative, you've got to have buy-in, you've got to have those face-to-face relationships that people will reach out and talk to each other on, right? And I say that because this is the level of complexity just in my area that we've taken on, right, since 2012, where we basically decided these are the particular steps of what we need to do and when we need to do it in order to take the right sustained steps going forward. And again, back to the, you can't go from A to Z in one step. You've got to hit B, C, D, E, and F. This is that vision where we're on. And we're within 2 months of what we originally set out on, which shows a bit about the team and a bit about the company's commitment. And over the last 4 years, our complete global agricultural industry has been in a 4-year slump. Part of that because our productivity as an industry has outpaced the demand that we thought we'd have. So AGCO has committed to invest in innovation during the downtimes as well, understanding the long-term benefits of that digitalization. So if we could key up that, and what we talk about now is what's in the oven, because as I said, we don't just stop, we continue to run, and hopefully we can get this to work.
For 3 so far, right?
Yeah, we're like the USA hockey team this morning, unfortunately. For those of you that were up watching it. Up 2-0 and then lose 3-2 in overtime. Ugh.
So while they're playing with that, I'm gonna start with a question. Oh, wait a second. No.
There we go. If we could just enlarge it, get the sound. Were you able to get it over the audio or no?
To intelligent equipment. How connected are you to modern farming? AGCO is leading ways in manufacturing
Guys, can we get
to
the
simplify and
window
advance
off the
farmers'
front?
yields through wearable technologies. We are improving quality by
Okay.
following step-by-step work instructions in weld,
Alex, we got a
paint,
box
and
here.
assembly. New hires are equipped with glass
Alex?
as part of their initial training.
I'm gonna play it again for you, give us a second. Let me find it again. I think it's coming in over there.
To intelligent equipment. How connected are you to modern farming?
Oh, the audio stopped
AGCO is
working.
leading ways in manufacturing to
Well, we had it
simplify
working.
and advance farmers' yields through wearable technologies.
Can hear it.
Devices.
You turn it up.
To intelligent
All
equipment.
right, let's try it one more time to start from the beginning.
How connected are you? Devices. To intelligent equipment. How connected are you to modern farming? AGCO is leading ways in manufacturing to simplify and advance farmers' yields through wearable technologies. We are improving quality by following step-by-step work instructions in weld, paint, and assembly. New hires are equipped with glass as part of their initial training.
Okay, glass. Zoom in. Okay, glass. Proceed.
While glass prompted advanced final product inspections drive value to our distributors and consumers, glass allows us to collaborate and share with cross-functional teams in real time with hands-free documenting capabilities.
Proceed. No. Take picture.
Glass, along with proceeding software, will adjust the level of instructions given based on an employee's level, instead of a one-size-fits-all approach. Immediate information allows trending of problems with rapid turnkey solutions. Using glass gives us greater accountability in shipping and receiving.
Okay, glass, proceed.
Okay, glass, add shortage.
Everything happens in real time, including picking up and delivering. Using a single source solution, keeping everyone in the know. Tours are more engaging, while AGCO guests are guided throughout the plant.
And when every second counts, advanced technologies like glass help us deliver that.
Welcome to the wonderful world of AGCO, leading the way with glass.
All right, so within that, that's we call that in the oven because we're really growing that around the world right now. We've got our 3 lead innovation sites, one in Jackson, Minnesota, second down in Porto Alegre, Brazil, and a third just outside Munich in Germany, that are rolling this out to more than 2,000 of our associates by the end of this year. And what we find is a huge level of just overall improved employee happiness because, one, the safety. They've got their hands are free, right? They're not having their hands on a tablet or something like that. Secondly, the data is real time, which means they're not having, in the case of logistics or materials, having to punch in things on a wrist scanner or on a handheld. And so as a result, we see improved accuracy, which is very good for us, and the operators like it. When you then take it to the next level of where it goes, when we have product that's out in the field, and our products break out in the field, right? It's just natural, and our customers understand that. But when you're using glass, you can tie that directly into someone back at a service desk, and they can see real time what's happening. And with that, they can see real time what's needed and position the product from a repair perspective, what's the closest dealer that's got the product that they need. With that comes improved customer serviceability. With that comes improved uptime for our customers, which is their profitability, which then brings back the customer retention. So for us, it's a win-win for our customers as well as for AGCO. So when we call it what's in the oven, we don't know everything that's going to come out, but we do know that there's a huge amount of opportunity that we've got across our 54 manufacturing facilities and 36 distribution centers across the globe to drive a huge level of improved performance through the digitalization, embracing the innovation that's out in the market today. And with that, we'll open up to any questions you might have, or Steve, if you want to go from there.
I've got several questions, but it looks like there's some questions from the audience. Let's take those first. Yeah.
Sorry, gentlemen, I had a few more videos, which everybody likes after lunch, right? But at least we got the glass one, which I think is probably one of the most insightful for some folks.
So how did you get your suppliers to play along? I was hitting over head and say, do this or you're...
No, it's a great question, great question. And with that, when we would have our supplier days across the globe, we would always ask, what is it that we can do better? How can we improve our relationship with you? And one of the common things that came back is you operate as if you're, at the time, 32 different companies, and that makes it more complex to deal with. So going forward, we say, we're working on this, and we expect to have something in place by X time. And being able to deliver on that commitment the same way that we hold our suppliers to commit to what they commit to us is a fair statement. And so when we did come to them and say, okay, you now need to be loading this transportation order. Oh, by the way, in 2 years from now, you won't have to do anything other than confirm it because we can convert the data from the B2B system into the TMS, or transportation order, which then helps them, but also drives improved accuracy. So the way that we positioned it was for, one, we're listening to their needs. Secondly, we're responding and doing what we said we would do. Three, we continue to drive improvement that would require less call it participation at their end, but in the end, it drove better process accuracy. And out of the initial go-around on the transportation side, say the first 2,800 suppliers, actually 2,500 suppliers, we only had 3 that did not cooperate. 3. And they eventually did. Questions? Did you have a question?
So, how do you get your glass? It's going to cost a pretty penny to implement, and how do you get your value out of it? How do you justify the value out front?
So there's a couple ways, but the first was safety, right? Because some of these products is, you see here a transmission gearbox. Yeah. These things are heavy, and these things you really don't want to drop on your head, your foot, or even anywhere around you. So by basically moving to a approach very similar to the suppliers, how can we benefit you as our employee, right, to have less concerns that you've got? How can we drive you to have to do less manual transactions, which you don't like to do, right? And we'd rather have the human not do it. So it's really a matter of how do you set the stage for what's the benefit for everyone involved, and that's not a company one-way beneficial initiative, but it's two-way. And typically when you've got a two-way initiative where it's a common beneficial to each, you get buy-in. And if you get buy-in, then during those times when you're starting to ramp up and you may have a few setbacks, because people believe in the process, they fight through the way to get it right. And then on the cost side, after we did our pilot in our Minnesota facility, it was no problem at all, because what we saw, and I think Eric mentioned this in the video, was basically a 30% reduction in the amount of startup training. So historically, it would take us anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks for you to have, say, Steve was teaching me how to do something new, and say that took 6 weeks. Now it only took 4 because of glass, and the quality level that new hire was able to attain was significantly higher than what the previous approach would be. And if any of you were in the wearables session this morning, they talked a little bit about that. We see that. We've seen that for years. And it's very beneficial for our organization and our team members. you.
Able to capture the best practices from the workers they're using, is that others can actually just hone in on those best practices that they're trying to rediscover every time.
So we have what we call centers of excellence around, and within every centers of excellence, we have super users. And the super user community are those people that are creative and entrepreneurial, but also helpful. So within that, they basically are able to talk with the people that are using the glass, whatever innovation it may be, get the feedback for, hey, what could be done better? And then they basically work as a group to basically collaborate and agree on which areas of focus do we want to improve in. We basically take that approach, whether it's on the manufacturing floor, whether it's the B2B, the TMS, the risk methods, whatever it might be, because the people that know the system the best are the people that are using it, 8 to 12 hours a day. It's not the guys sitting behind or up on the podium giving a presentation, right? And part of that is the way and the culture that we try to drive. It's listen to the people that understand that you're asking to complete the task. Those are the same people that build the product that go to our customers. And so far, it's been very beneficial. I mean, you should see this, the lead super user down in Brazil. This guy he's got a smile ear to ear, one, because he's designated a super user, but two, because he's driving innovation, right? And he likes it. And once you get that power and passion behind you on the factory floor, good things happen usually. No, none whatsoever. Now, we're not using it in Finland yet, right? But it's not going to be a problem at all, Portuguese, no problem. French, German, English, Spanish, Mandarin, and Cantonese are currently under development. The language barrier is not the issue at all. It's more along of getting either the translations that we may need to do, particularly if I have a product that's designed out of, say, France, that is assembled in China. That's where we have a little bit of a lag. But now, as we have this as part of our kind of a new product introduction phase from a manufacturability or for design for supply chain, we start those activities much earlier on in the product life cycle. Great question. Proactively.
Go ahead.
I have a question about the glasses. Obviously, it's the way of viewing content. So are you creating the content specific for viewing on the glasses, or is this content that someone has already created? You've seen someone create content and just a way of viewing on the system?
Very good question. So basically the interface is between our MES or manufacturing execution system and the glass, right? And within that, initially, the way that we developed our, call it work instructions, operator manuals, was the way we'd always been doing it. But then as we started migrating to more of a digital approach, we actually changed our approach to be much more focused. And it's, like we heard this morning, it's not like you're going to put a full 8 by 11 page in glass. It's much more specific to the particular task that you're doing. And then once you're done with that, you engage or transact, voice or slide to the next step. And it's less distracting, right? Because you don't have as much in front of you. You have only step one, versus the page may have 4 different operational steps.
Do the teams set aside to help figure out what this content should be?
Absolutely.
How big is that team required to actually support all this?
I don't have that answer, but if I get your card, I'll get you an answer probably tomorrow morning by noon. Because I'm half the lady that runs this for us globally. I've got breakfast with her tomorrow at 7. Yeah.
So I actually have a Google Glass question as well. In the warehouse, it's called hands-free. They have something called voice recognition, which basically says go to slot XYZ, pick 3 of the items there. So did you look at voice recognition versus Google Glass in making this decision, and why was Google Glass better?
Google Glass was initially targeted for the operators. And from a warehousing or material logistics perspective, that was the secondary thought. We actually went down another path in Europe initially, and we decided after having some initial success with the glass that glass was the better long-term solution for that, because we had options of voice as well as visual. And with that, ideally, the operators didn't like the way the headset came out and the microphone came out. They'd rather have just the glasses and nothing in front of their mouth. So the operators had a little bit of say in that as well. And that's where we're at today.
So I have a series of questions. Now, you mentioned 28% reduction in inbound transportation costs. That's
Correct.
freight cost reductions or, okay.
Great cost.
We do ROI research on TMS. Not all that unusual to get 10% savings from putting a TMS in. I have never heard of 28%. So what is it about the four-flow solution or the way you implemented it that really sort of put you at the top of the curve there?
So when you go back, Steve, in time, in Europe, where we did the pilot for this program, we had 11 manufacturing sites and 3 or 4 different distribution centers, all operating somewhat independent inbound models. And in many cases, those sites would have common shared suppliers. And it was not uncommon that, say, if we had a supplier that shipped all, I'll just call it, say, 10 of those sites, having 10 different trucks show up on a particular day. And it was very common that that would go LTL or groupage. And as we were able then to convert that to truckload, throw it into consolidation or cross-dock centers, we were able to significantly drive down the number of pickups, increase the load density, change out from LTL to milk run or truckload, reduce the frequency of pickups that we had, and as a result of that, leverage a much more holistic network approach. And in addition to that, when we started that, we had 3 major 3PL carriers managing about 80% of our inbound value. How many carriers do you think we had 3 years later? Anybody, take a wild guess.
1.
Wrong way.
Oh.
70, right?
Yeah.
So most people think about reduction equals simplicity, which equals less cost. What we found was the exact opposite. Increase the complexity, manage it with technology, and then where you can cherry pick because the technology allows you to optimize. And as a result of that, we're able to do the 28%, and some of the factories are actually upwards of 40%, the smaller factories.
So when I talked to 4Flow, they talked a lot about how they do the network at the same time they're doing sort of traditional transportation optimization.
Correct.
So how often are you sort of changing your lane structures and your network? With a lot of companies, they do that once a year.
Well, you could say that we do it every day to some extent at a minor level.
No.
Whether it's the type of mode, we're basically looking anywhere from 3 to 4 to 5 times a year at what that forward-looking volume looks like. And because we can look at the forward-looking inbound volume, it tells us when we should take action. Right? Historically, as you said, companies look backwards. What did I move in the last 6 months? What did I move in the last 12 months? But is that really important versus what you're going to move in the next 12 months? In our view, let's look forward, not backwards.
Right.
And it's, is it going to be 100%? No. But it's much more predictive than it is reflective.
Yep.
And with that, for those of you that are involved in any type of freight management these days, particularly in North America and in Europe, trucking is a premium. Right now, Germany last week, or maybe it was the week before, basically said that trucking is currently an industry crisis in Germany because there's simply not enough trucks to go around. And drivers is a major complementing factor to that. So if you can work with your partner carriers to say, this is what I'm going to need, next week, next month, 10 months from now, the level of optimization that they can do in terms of the planning and not having to deadhead back or anything like that helps them. So back to the win-win, which helps then drive down your operating costs because you're an easier customer to do business with.
When I asked you to be on the panel, I knew 2 things about you guys. I knew you had the best transportation savings I'd ever heard of, and you were the first company I came across doing sort of real-time risk management with risk methods. I'm going to attempt to explain how it works in a little bit of detail, but then I'll come back with a question for you. So the way I understand it, and Greg may correct me, they take all their suppliers, they lay out the lanes. So this supplier delivers through this port, across this ocean, to this port, to this factory. And then they have words that they're searching for. So it might be the name of a supplier and the word bankruptcy in Portuguese. Or it might be the word port, port fire, in Dutch, right? Because these all map to the lanes. And then in real time, Risk Methods has a cockpit. They're going out to tens of thousands of media sites looking for these words. And that's how you guys get the alerts before anyone else, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
My question is this. When it comes to transportation management, it's easy to say there's ROI, we're going to reduce your freight spend. How do you sell an ROI on reducing risks that may or may not happen in the future?
That's an very interesting question, Steve. Because typically, how do you put a value on preventing something from happening that may or may not happen? And our view is more of an insurance policy, right? And I'll give the example with the hydraulic accumulator supplier that had the fire last year that supplied 60% of the industry. If we would not known about that and basically been one of the first ones in line, right? We would have had hundreds of millions of dollars in lost revenue. Not to mention several $1 million in air freight costs because a fire is considered force majeure, right? We know the rest. So with that, it's more of an insurance policy. And how do you lay out, how can we not afford to invest in this? And it's not a huge amount of money, right? But it's one of those insurance policies that after a couple of times of benefiting from it, there's never another question. So the question is, how do we get further? How do we go down into the tier 2? How do we go down to the tier 3? Which is what we're getting into at this point in time. Because if one of our tier 1 suppliers has their tier 1, our tier 2 has a fire, when do we find out about it? Probably not for some time.
Right.
But if we start asking the questions much earlier, we get the answers much sooner. And by saving that time, then you can take alternate measures. I don't think there is one answer, one right answer. It's just what does the company value in terms of potential risk, and how do we potentially avoid that as much as possible. But there's been lots of cases, port strikes, fires, weather, ships run aground.
Yeah.
How do you roll this out? Geographically dispersed, you got a very set of tools. You go in with a big bang, or how do you roll this out?
So we start off, as I mentioned, kind of a center of excellence. So when we started back in 12, we said Europe is going to be the pilot for our new transportation management. North America will be our pilot for B2B. South America will be the pilot for organizational setup. Europe will basically do the risk management piece, and then from a supplier performance perspective, we started in Asia. So within that, these people, this team of leadership, some of which you saw in one of the pictures, talks every 2 weeks. How are you doing? What's happening? And it's a standard running agenda. And then as things are happening, everybody's in the know. They take the decision if we need to pivot or do something else. But as that proof of concept works out at a site, it then rolls out to the region, which then goes out to another region, starting out in one site, then the region. And what we find is I'll take people, say, out of Europe, have them mentor super user type into North America. They like that, right? Because you take a 28-year-old kid that's single and they're going to send them to North America for 3 or 4 months. They get excited about that, and so does everybody else that they work with because they want to be in that same situation, right? So exactly, and that's part of it by embracing the change because you're involved up front and you understand the vision of where it's going, creates that passion, and that passion is energy, and that energy is what gets things done. At the beginning, yes, there was quite a bit. But after the first project paid off quite well, it got to a point, honestly, where I cannot keep up with the resources that I have, right? I cannot keep up with the implementation. And that was back in the maybe 15 and 16 time period. That is, because how many corporate offices basically are having the plants knock on the door in the region say, we want your guys here, right? I love it, it makes it easy. Well, most of the time, but then you get the senior VP saying, I want it in my region, da-da-da. I'm not going to cut corners, we're not going to do it wrong, and that they understand. But the change management piece is probably one of the most complicated and the most underestimated elements of a transformation like this. And we're starting this right now. You may saw that the key things that we're getting into now is on the integrated demand planning piece. So now as I'm engaging with the front end of the business, engaging out to the dealers, and I want to basically be able to connect to their levels of inventory at the product line level, compare that to what's happening across the region, compare that to what's happening with the market information, and then compare that to what is happening with our online configurators in terms of the number of hits I get on a particular option or planning, to see within the supply network, do we have enough capacitized suppliers available to be able to take action before the customer is actually buying, their $500,000 or $300,000 unit, right? And again, how do you use the information that's available to make stronger decisions faster before you have a problem? It's being proactive as much as you possibly can, whether it's risk management, whether it's big data, whether it's market awareness. How do you do it better than your competition? You invest.
Could also be investing in the people having his own IT skills come to play here. You have your own team, you buy it in, how do you?
It's a combination. We mentioned, in pretty much each one of these, we've went outside. So we had 4Flow on the transportation management, with SAP on the B2B, with Risk Methods on the risk management, and then a company called Procurance out of Poland for the supplier performance management cockpit, right? And so within that, rather than try to develop everything yourself internally, go on and find somebody that's got something that works, right? Go and find it. Go and see what you hear a lot of from a Lean's principles. And a lot of that happens at conferences like this. You bump into people, hey, what do you do? You're at, you find things that are happening, but that's also having the people with the time to go out and discover and learn.
Yeah, and discover probably more than that, going into a partnership, because these solutions, you're at the forefront. They're not ready to go. Are we the next? It's a partnership to make them ready to go.
In some cases, yes. In the case of like 4Flow, they're a true partner, right? It wasn't like every time we asked for a change, they said, okay, well, here's 5 more man days or 20 more man days. It was, when we win these awards, you're up on the stage with us because you're part of that win. And with that comes a true partnership because it's mutually beneficial, right? And I'm sure, they've increased their headcount from 350 to 500 in the last couple of years as a direct result of this. I'm not going to call it free advertising, but it's partnered benefits, and we're good with that.
How do you filter those vendors, suppliers? Everybody's got something to sell you, right?
Well, sure.
How do you pick up who really understands?
We've got a pretty, what I would call, thorough due diligence effort, and within that, it's a cross-functional element between our IT folks, and we have 2 elements of IT. We've got kind of the infrastructure IT and the architectural IT. We're an SAP house, we're driving to SAP across the globe. So as we think long-term about new vendors, whether it's software or service, we're thinking, how does that integrate into our long-term strategy? And those that do, then they may take the next step in. Those that don't, we say, hey, sorry, but you got a great company, good luck to you, but we're taking a different route or we're not interested. But probably everybody in this room gets 50 emails a day from people trying to sell some type of service or product, right? The digitalization aspect, your emails are probably going somewhere from here today, and you'll probably get 50 new ones next week. But it's having that solid level of due diligence. And we made one mistake along the way, one mistake, and it cost us about $600,000. When we said, after we got into it, we said, this is not the right partner for us. Right? But nothing good comes without taking some level of risk. It's just, how do you learn from it? How do you protect yourself from the next time? After I get slapped in the back of the head. And then it gets added to my objective for the year. More questions?
Cybersecurity is tremendous importance, and you have a very large supply chain ecosystem of partners and suppliers. Do you dictate the
Yes.
So they might have folks in your IT system also, right?
It's absolutely true. I mean, we've got a complete cybersecurity group, and people are hard to find and even harder to maintain, right, on your staffs. But part of that due diligence is the cybersecurity that our guys get into direct discussions with our software providers, particularly when it's cloud-based, right? And, to think about that, if our transportation network gets hacked, we've got some problems.
Have you learned from Target?
But it's a very good question, and it's a growing risk every day. I like the questions, gentlemen. Let's keep them coming.
So it's one software for the warehouse, one software for production, so both the same.
So as we migrate to an SAP backend or ECC backend, eventually we're going to go to HANA, most likely when we start in North America in 2019. And with that, what we want to be able to have is an integrated B2B that has the TMS also integrated into it. And what we're thinking about doing and what we want to be able to do is drive some level of sensor technology that's embedded into our WMS serialized barcode label, that when it comes in the receiving floor, that basically the receiving transaction is completed. That way there's no human activity at all. And then for each of those handling units that processes through the warehouse, that we've got track and trace capability tied to the serialized label. Now today in our SAP factories, as that product comes in, certain cases we have to put an SAP label on it, the serialized label. There's a lot of waste. I mean, if you have a factory that's getting 40,000 handling units per day, relabeling those is pretty much a waste. We're migrating to where the supplier who today puts a barcode label on it, but what we want to be able to do is embed that track and trace sensor to not only improve on the traceability, but reduce the human key punch errors that we've got, enable more real-time transactioning, as well as the benefits that you come from track and trace in the transportation leg. And that right now is the thing that we're out searching for very aggressively.
These machines that you sell, they have a lot of IT in it as well.
Excuse me?
A lot of IT equipment in it as well.
Oh yeah, the product.
They have a lot in it.
Yeah.
Do you see that you harvest some of these statements of engines and stuff as well in order to, I don't know, perform, increase your performance or make this maybe?
Well, what we have in active use today is from a predictive analytics, or call it ongoing maintenance, because we develop our own engines, we develop our own drive lines in 95% of the cases. And with that, have the ability, which we do today, to sense the wear and tear on an engine, or transmission, front axle, whatever it is. With that, be able to bounce back into our aftermarket inventory system to see where's the closest repair part located today. Is that in proximity to the customer within X amount of hours, yes or no? And then with that, the customer is going to get some type of notice if they're subscribing to the service that says, we estimate that your crown wheel and pinion is going to fail within 40 hours of operation. We have a part that will be available to you within 48 hours. When would you like to schedule it? That's the level that we're going to through our Fuse program. And it's pretty slick stuff, right? And the customers really like it because why? It solves the problems they have before they have them. At the end of the day, that's important to us.
Right when you were in the product lifecycle development for a new product, new tractor, for instance, you're probably exchanging large amounts of data, drawings, and other documentation with your vendor, sending them, they're sending you things. So there's a high level of interaction on the network, but then it may reduce as you've done that and they're working on it. Do you feel that sometimes your network is throttled and constricting you, or in others is it like not be used? Do you feel that?
I'm not so close to if that's actually happening or not, but I mean, what I can share is we're getting much more into the virtual design activities where the engineers will be sitting in a room with helmets on and linked to their counterparts in Germany or in Brazil or wherever it is, looking at how functional models come together from a form, fit, function perspective, and it's pretty cool stuff. Now, how that then correlates back to one of our tier one suppliers, I can't comment on. But I do know that going forward, that's something that we want to continue to push on from a digital collaboration perspective, more so than always having to have people come in, right? Because if it costs 1 or 2 or 3 days for people to line up time, or we lose a couple weeks because people's availability, but if you can have a virtual session where you're engaging, it's pretty powerful stuff. You save time. Time to market is absolutely a critical thing for us. Question in the back. Today we use an SAP WMS. We do not use an SAP TMS. It depends what the 2022 offering looks like. That's where we're at right now with them. So with all of our service providers, like SAP, we use them for our ERP. We may not use them for the other functionalities, but that doesn't mean we're not interested in where they're going or giving them feedback of maybe where they need to go into. The same thing with our existing partners, right? Don't stop it where you're at. We're going to push you hard to get stronger and better and stay ahead. But that comes with a true partnership, right? There's nothing wrong with raising the bar every day, as long as they understand the expectation up front. Steve?
Okay, I guess I'll do a short presentation. Yeah. Wow, right?
Thank you, gentlemen.